I love you. Those are three really simple words that are said across the world for a number of different reasons, countless times each and every day. But why might someone repeat those three words 9 times in a 14-line poem? Let's find out. How's it going, Revision Squad? It's me, Liam, aka Mr. Knight, aka DystopiaJunkie, or whatever it is you know me as. And in this video, I'm back with some more poetry analysis. Today, we're going to look at Sonnet 43 by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, which can be found on page 5 of the WJEC Eduqas Poetry Anthology. So before we get started with the video, I recommend grabbing a pen to make notes with, at least 3 highlighters, and some extra paper too. This video will follow the same structure as my last 2 videos, which were for Simon Armitage's The Manhunt. If you haven't seen those videos yet, a link for them and the rest of my WJEC Eduqas Poetry Anthology playlist should be appearing on screen about now. Think about there. So in this video I will read the poem. I will go through the poem's context, since it's vital to your understanding of the poem and also your success in your exam. Relating analysis to context is, after all, equal to 1/3 of the marks. I will provide a close reading of the poem, going through its imagery, its language, and its structure. Explained annotations will be something I provide, but I will be giving you some questions first, just in case you want to come up with your own interpretations. To be honest, trying to answer the questions on your own and then looking at my ideas is how you will make the most out of this video. Showing a consideration of alternative interpretations of the same poem or even the same quotation is a top grade skill. I will consider the poem's meaning, mood, and the poet's motivation. Then I'll think about the themes it could relate to. And finally, at the end of the video, there will be an optional revision task for you to complete, because I'm nice like that. So to make sure that you don't miss out on a single one of these videos, please make sure that you drop it a like, subscribe to my channel, DystopiaJunkie, and click the notification bell too. That way, any upcoming videos will get straight into your subscription feed and you'll be alerted when I publish them. So cringe-worthy self-promotion aside, it's time to read the poem. Make sure to follow along on your copy in your anthology. Sonnet 43. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach when feeling out of sight, for the ends of being and ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need, by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely, as men strive for right. I love thee purely, as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in mild griefs, and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seemed to lose, with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life, and, if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. And now for some context. Although you may not need to know these dates exactly, knowing that Elizabeth Barrett Browning was alive in the first half of the 19th century will allow you to consider that the world she lived in was very different to the one we live in today. Her family, were pretty wealthy. She had come from a long line of slave and plantation owners. She was religious, very religious, and although this waned slightly in her later life as she studied more philosophy and theology, she described her childhood faith as the visions of an enthusiast. Although her early childhood was relatively happy and healthy, she became ill in her early teens, suffering from a mysterious, undiagnosed pain in her head and spine. This continued for the rest of her life, and she took an array of opiates, which were commonly prescribed at the time, to battle her illness. Some people argue that it's the opiates that caused the sheer amount of imagination in her writing. Now, in the years leading up to her writing this poem, her mother died, her grandmother died, and two of her brothers died. She felt particularly guilty about the death of her second brother, as he had been visiting her in Torquay, where she had moved for her health, when he had a sailing accident. Elizabeth Barrett Browning also had a notoriously difficult relationship with her father, who was controlling and tyrannical. She vocally opposed slavery, and he bitterly opposed the idea of his children marrying, and he threatened to disown Elizabeth when she got married. Oh yeah, Elizabeth got married. She married a man called Robert Browning, who was also a reputable Victorian writer. That is really important to this poem. Robert began writing to Elizabeth, who was mostly housebound due to her illness, after she gained literary success following the publication of her 1844 book of poetry called, very imaginatively, Poems. He quite literally slid into her DMs. They communicated via letters for some time, only meeting a few times in person, as Elizabeth knew her father would not approve of her courtship. In the correspondence, which quickly became love letters, Elizabeth included some poems. Sonnet 43 is the 43rd out of 44 sonnets that she sent Robert. I'll tell you a bit more about sonnets in a moment. Now, this romance revitalized Elizabeth. Prior to her courtship with Robert, people argued that she was becoming a shadow of her former self, and she wouldn't talk about societal or poetical issues. And that changed. Elizabeth and Robert married in secret, and then they moved to Italy for Elizabeth's health. Now, for Elizabeth, the sonnets that she wrote to Robert were incredibly personal. She didn't really intend for them to be seen by the rest of the world, which is something I think is really worth considering. Robert, though, persuaded her that they were of a very high quality. In fact, he said that they were the best since Shakespeare. She eventually agreed to publish her poems, but only under the disguise of being foreign translations. Now, a number of reasons are given for Portuguese being the alleged origin of choice, but one that I quite like is that Robert's nickname for Elizabeth was My Little Portuguese. So I've used the word sonnet a few times already in this video, but what does that even mean? So a sonnet is a type of poem. It's a love poem. Sonnets are 14 lines long, and they're usually split into an 8-line octet and a 6-line sestet. Sonnets are usually written in iambic pentameter, which is 10 syllables, syllables meaning beats, per line, written as 5 repetitions of didum, of an unstressed and a stressed syllable. Now, iambic pentameter It's often said to mirror the rhythm of normal spoken English. The octet usually introduces an idea or problem. A volta, which means turn, occurs between the 8th and 9th lines. The rhyme scheme changes after it a little bit, and so does the line of argument or the topic. Because in the sestet, the problem set out in the octet is usually solved, or if it's not a problem or just an idea, it is commented on more generally. Sonnets also follow a set rhyme scheme, or there's a few different variations. For instance, you could have A, B, B, A, B, B, A, C, D, C, D, C, D, meaning the first, 4th, 5th, and 8th lines rhyme, 2nd, 3rd, 6th and 7th lines rhyme, and then 9, 11, and 13 rhyme, and 10, 12, and 14 too as well. Before we get started annotating the poem fully, this is your reminder to get your 3 highlighters and to set up your own key. You'll need 1 colour for imagery, 1 for language, and 1 for structure. As I said in the last video, it's worth having something to say about the title of each anthology poem. That way, you'll have at least 1 bit of analysis for each poem, which you could use if it's your given poem, or if it's the one you choose to use for the comparison question. And there's the question for the title of this poem. It focuses on the title's language. So pause now if you want a go at making your own annotation. Traditionally, sonnets are love poems, and so this poem must intrinsically be related to love if it is a sonnet. Saying just that seems a bit redundant though, and so we could also analyse the number 43 too. So using context, we also know that this poem is the 43rd sonnet out of 44 that Barrett Browning wrote to Robert Browning during their courtship. So we've written so many sonnets for her eventual husband, it becomes apparent that Elizabeth Barrett Browning had deep and intense feelings of love for him. So when thinking about the first 4 lines of the poem, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 questions I think are worth considering. 3 are for language and 1 is for the poem's structure. Relatively speaking, I think this poem is quite light when it comes to actual imagery, so you might not be using that highlighter too much. As per usual, pause the video now if you want to attempt to make your own annotations, otherwise carry on watching the video. So in the first 4 lines, as well as the poem generally, we've got loads of first person pronouns. I, me, my. You could, if you wanted to, go back and highlight all of them in the poem. Using these first person pronouns makes the poem seem more intimate and perhaps also autobiographical. I mean, using context, we do know that Elizabeth Barrett Browning was writing from her own viewpoint. The second person pronoun, the, which is just an old version of you when it's used as a subject in a sentence, makes it clear that this poem has an intended or desired audience. And context tells us that this is Robert Browning. By asking a question, Barrett Browning makes it clear what the poem will be about, her love for Robert Browning. Posing it as a question makes it seem conversational too, almost as if Robert Browning had previously asked her about her love in a previous letter. The ways in which she loves Robert must also be counted. This suggests that the size of her love is massive, as it's not immediately quantifiable. This suggests that the ways are many and varied. The list is very emphatic and exaggerated. Barrett Browning has covered each of the 3 physical dimensions, and says that her love for Robert extends to the metaphysical extremes of this, meaning it's not just what she can literally reach, but as far as her soul can go. Using such an emphatic and exaggerated list shows the completeness of Barrett Browning's love for Robert. As it says on the screen now, the enjambment creates a sense of breathlessness. The lines don't pause in the right places, and they run on longer than we'd expect them to, which could reflect her passion and intense feelings for Robert. Furthermore, and I haven't written this on the slide, it also suggests that her love transcends the limitations of poetic form. Her love can't and won't stop just because the lines have ended. There's only 1, 2, 3 questions that I'd want to consider when thinking about the next 4 lines of the poem, and really one of them is about the whole poem. So there's 1 question for each component or aspect of poetry, 1 for imagery, 1 for language, and 1 for structure. Pause now if you'd like to make your own annotations based on my questions. And of course, feel free to share your own ideas and your own analysis down in the comment section below. Barrett Browning's repetition of "I love thee" could suggest multiple things about her and her love for Robert Browning. Now, aside from it being the poem's refrain, it could also show that she is immensely devoted to Robert, as she is truly emphasizing her feelings for him. Her feelings for him are so strong that she is practically bursting with love for him. On the other hand, it could show that Barrett Browning felt a bit insecure in her love for Robert, and that she was desperate to keep hold of it. She repeats the phrase "I love thee" so much because she is worried that Robert does not know or understand how she really feels, and that's despite 42 sonnets before it. Whichever interpretation you choose to agree with, or one of your own of course, it can be linked to the same bit of context. Barrett Browning had a difficult relationship with her father, who was cold, cruel, and controlling. Through meeting Robert, Elizabeth may have met, for the first time in her life, a man who truly loved her. And that's something I think she wouldn't have wanted to have lost. Sun and candlelight are images that are standing in for day and night. Through juxtaposing those 2 images, Barrett Browning shows that her love for Robert is all-encompassing. She loves him fully, always, and with unwavering intensity. In order to really understand this final annotation, we need to really understand what the last 2 lines of this section of the poem mean. The 3rd line here means that Barrett Browning loves Robert as easily and as willingly as people who always do the right thing are compelled to do the right thing, i.e., it comes naturally to her. Carrying on with those do-gooders, Barrett Browning says that her love for Robert is as pure as their behaviour too. They turn away from praise, meaning that they do good things for the sake of doing good things, not for any rewards or recognition that they might get for it. In behaving like this, their behaviour is pure, just as pure as Barrett Browning's love for Robert. Through making these 2 comparisons, Barrett Browning is starting to establish a semantic field of morality. Elizabeth's love for Robert is both good and right. And here are the final 6 lines of the poem. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 things that I'd like to consider. 3, as you can see, are related to language, whereas 1 is more of a structural observation. Pause now if you want to make your own annotations first. Except you won't get the answers to those questions just yet. This is the end of part 1 of my analysis of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Sonnet 43, and part 2 will be following very shortly. I just wanted to not have such a massive long video for you basically, so I'll split it up into two instead. I hope you found this video useful, helpful, or even interesting. If you have done, please do consider dropping it a like and subscribing to my channel. As I just said, part 2 coming very soon, so keep your eyes peeled. And I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.